We will begin with a quantum leap over to the Enterprise episode Judgment. We will talk about the right to counsel. And Christine, can you take us away?
So in our system, the counsel clause of the Sixth Amendment is what guarantees criminal defendants the right to have an attorney represent them in any case that could result in a sentence of actual imprisonment. The Klingon system appears to have a similar guarantee because Archer is assigned Kolos as his advocate in this episode. The Sixth Amendment right in our system has also been interpreted to include the right to reasonably effective assistance of counsel, but it's very difficult to establish a violation of that right. So the defendant not only has to show that counsel made errors, but the errors were so serious that they prejudiced the defense. And a showing of prejudice usually means that absent the unprofessional errors, the result of the proceeding would have been different.
Neil, let's talk about Kolos, the defense attorney. And do you think he was effective counsel for Captain Archer?
So the answer is kind of yes and kind of no. If you watch the episode at the very beginning, they put in all of this damaging evidence against Jonathan Archer. Complete mischaracterization of the facts, like us litigators sometimes do. And when the defense lawyer is asked to go and put his side of the case on, he says, "I have nothing," which is not a typical defense maneuver. You try and put on your side of the case. And basically what happens is Jonathan Archer's in the holding cell, and the lawyer comes back, and this isn't the exact dialogue, and I know that being imprecise on Star Trek programs is always a tremendous mistake, but he says, "Come on, man, that's not really a defense." And he says, "You got into being a defender for a reason, and you got into being a lawyer for a reason," and gives this big inspirational speech. And then Kolos ultimately comes on, and he puts on a very, very forceful defense of Jonathan Archer. And he's still found guilty, and it is such a forceful defense, and the lawyer feels so strongly, he actually gets given the same sentence and ends up in the same place. Now,
as a lawyer, I'm opposed to that.
I'm against that. I'm against that part of the outcome. I mean, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. But you know, if I'm sentenced to the dilithium crystal mines, it's not really a good system of justice.
Well, let's talk about the trial itself. And we have Duras testify. And there's a lot of mischaracterizations of the facts that the former captain testifies to. And Christine, what would you do if you had been putting together the cross-examination of Duras, since Archer's defense attorney chooses not to cross him?
So I think the key to crossing Duras is to attack his credibility. He's Orak, the prosecutor's only witness, and he's a big liar. So even though Kolos may be onto something when he says, okay, this guy's not going to say anything that's going to help you, yeah, maybe not on purpose, but that doesn't mean there's no value in crossing him. And I think the key to picking him apart may actually lie in another thing that Kolos says. Later in that episode, he asks, what honor is there in victory over a weaker opponent? But everybody who's in the room in that trial knows that Duras actually lost to a weaker opponent. So he has motive to lie, to try to save face. So I would try and warm him up with some questions that he's probably going to say yes to, that reinforce that he has the better ship, he's the better fighter, humans are not good fighters. And then I would move on to questions that he can't really say no to, because it's the whole reason they're there, that Archer is on trial. And that's the fact that Duras lost, despite being the better fighter with the better ship. So, and I would argue then to the judge that Duras' incompetence and the dishonor and the shame of his failure shows he really has motive to lie. So I think just going over those facts that reinforce that dishonor and making sure the judge remembers them is the key to attacking his credibility.
Which brings us to the comparison of Klingon jurisprudence and the US system. And Bethany, how are the two similar and how are they different?
Well, to the question of how similar is Klingon jurisprudence to the United States, the answer is, well, very. It's kind of the difference between Klingon law and Federation law is very similar to the difference between the adversarial and inquisitorial systems of law. The US, we use an adversarial system, which basically means that you have two different parties they are fighting each other while the judge is supposed to be a neutral arbiter and kind of determine the truth based on neutral objective standards while watching these two parties. The inquisitorial system, which is in civil law countries like France and Italy, the judge is much more active in gathering evidence and asking for witnesses and all of that, and it's supposed to be a search for the truth, and the judge's job is to find the truth versus be a neutral arbiter. Now the Klingons, they say the truth must be won. I'll see you on the battlefield. So it's adversarial, it's combative, it's the way things are in the U.S. where we fight with opposing counsel and we have all of that. And so it's very similar in that way. Whereas the Federation comes back and says, this is not a fight, it is a search for the truth, and that is very inquisitorial. Now, some of the ways that the US system has been criticized is by the principle of equality of arms. When you're in combat, it means that the side that has better resources, is better equipped, has better lawyers, will often win, and that's a criticism, and it's the same with Klingon law. One major difference is that Klingon law tends to be a bit more combative, taking a bit more literally. It's a little rougher, but it's definitely a system that we recognize here.
Some patent litigation, I think, is probably approaches Klingon in terms of level of actual physical.
Let me just add one thing, is that at the very beginning of the episode, Jonathan Archer's asked to give a plea, which is a very common thing in a criminal procedure. And he says, I'm not guilty. And what the judge says is we'll reconvene for you to prove your innocence. And as you might know, in the United States, you're innocent until proven guilty. But clearly in the Klingon system, it's the opposite. You have to prove your innocence.
Well, it would be unfair to put an innocent person on trial, so.
That's
Oh, the police state. For I guess